everybody, and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios and other things that happen to run on glowing vacuum tubes. And today we have this lovely Silvertone clock radio. If you're curious what the model is, it says catalog number 3025, and it looks like this came in black, ivory, and red. And we have the black one. And it is a typical 5-tube set. We've got a 50C5, a 35W4, 12AV6, 12BA6, and 12BE6. It also has a clock in it, obviously. This is a telecom movement, as it says. Condition, as far as working, I don't know, but someone sure spent a lot of time cleaning it up because it's very pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it up. Let's look in the back and see if we have tubes gluing. I can't even see them. Where are they? I can't really film it, but they're glowing, so that's good. A lot of these guys just buzz.
5 with a 4
Colorado Niles.
Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this is a real DA. I have no idea.
How it works. So that means either someone's worked on it before, or it just has the original parts in it, or who knows. I don't trust any set that comes in, especially ones where someone says they've been restored. I will always take them apart to see what's going on, because some people's definition of quote-unquote restored is very different than mine. And also, the quality of the restoration is going to vary a lot. I've seen some stuff where what was done is just outright dangerous. And so unless it's just your radio and it works and you're just like, who cares? I'm going to put it on the shelf, and if it breaks, I'll fix it. On the other hand, if it's something where you're repairing a customer's set or getting one ready to sell, then you definitely need to make sure that you've checked it out and you've done the right things. I took the back off, and I can tell right away someone's been in here. And initially I was like, oh, they did a nice job. Like, this is real solid. I mean, is it pretty? No, but it's functional. But then I started looking at it a little bit closer, and the can is usually ground on these. You've got a common ground. What they've done here, and I'll have to look up the schematic, is they've made the ground of the electrolytics go directly to chassis ground. And you probably shouldn't do that. I'm amazed the set actually works as it is. Again, I'll need to pull the schematic to see where the reference ground is in this. It could be that the only thing going to ground could be a 2-ground capacitor. And that would make sense. And that would mean you could still get away with that, because this would be essentially partially neutralized from the incoming AC. What am I going with that is that most of these sets are not what you would classically call a true hot chassis set, where one end of the AC line goes here. Most of them will have a capacitor that gets to the chassis before that. And so that capacitor, just because of what it does, is going to reduce the amount of current that could get to you if you were to touch this. And there's a few areas to touch. This, that, the area around the outlet. Absolutely cannot have any dangerous current on that, because someone could possibly touch it. So let's pull the chassis. It looks like the way that you do it is you pull screws here, here, and here. There's 2 screws here. So I'll pull that off. I can't remember if the clock comes out also, but we'll find out. Didn't get very far on the first day working on this thing, because I had a bunch of things happening all at once. Mother-in-law came in, moved in. I needed to fix her stuff. Had a few events happen at the radio museum, but now I am back, and I'd removed this because I was just curious. Most of it, the roast of the writing on the side was covered up by the straps. I was like, what values are in here? And they've gone way off here. It's 10 microfarads, 200 microfarads, and 140 microfarads. That just shows you that these guys will operate just about on anything, because that's totally not the right values, but yet it worked fine. I'm also not happy with the fact that they decided to ground the electrolytic, even though if I'm reading the schematic correctly, that probably wouldn't hurt anything because everything in this is floating. And what I mean floating is that it's not chassis ground. It's not a hot chassis. It's going instead through this capacitor to here on this volume control mount. That's the ground going through that capacitor and that resistor. So what I'm going to do is reroute the negative of the replacement electrolytics to there, because that's, I think, where it needs to go, or it should go. And if it doesn't work, I'll know real quick because it just won't do anything. I might tighten these up a little bit. These are kind of sloppily put in. I don't like this electrical tape. This tends to be work that I would see from someone that maybe doesn't necessarily do this a whole lot, which is fine. You know, we all have to start somewhere. And so again, it's fine. But let's replace these electrolytics. And it's just the ground. So weird the way they did this. Never liked this chassis that much, but whatever. Okay, well, I replaced all the electrolytics in a very sort of weird way. Maybe not a weird way, but just a different way. So, get this out of here. I know that the common ground is here. So I just traced where that goes throughout the set and just connected all of the negatives of the electrolytic capacitors to that common negative. For most of you guys, you're like, duh, no wonder. Now, will this work? I don't know, because now we're going from a set that had a direct ground for the electrolytics to now an indirect ground going through a capacitor. And that is not happy. That is an unhappy noise. That probably means the electrolytics wanted a ground that we're not giving it now. Oh! And we've got smoke. What is smoking here? Something was not happy. That resistor is getting really hot. So it could be I disconnected this to the absolutely wrong place. Let me just double check here. This is called being stupid, because I thought I had traced this wire here to the ground here, but it actually is going to the other side of the incoming AC, which is definitely not what you want to do. So let's see if it doesn't smoke. Not smoking would be great. And is it on? Because I don't hear any noise. Okay, it's on. And there's no humming. Oh, come on.
Alarm, security, and fire alarms for every business. Drop over 16 and a half. Where we embrace hope for a brighter, more just future.
And here's the question. Would you rather lose in the championship or
does that take? Or how many outs does that take? Because
Amount. And getting in this verse first.
All right.
Engine.
So, luckily I didn't blow up anything that bad. Now, one thing I will need to do is replace the to the ground capacitor. And the reason, what value is it right now? Let's see. Can't tell without my flashlight. 0.068. It's probably about the same that came with it. It was probably an 0.05 microfarads. All that means is that if you were to touch this and ground at the same time, you might get a little bit of a shock, which is not great. And back in the day, they weren't quite sure, or at least they weren't aware of how little it takes to cause a person's heart to fibrillate, which is very little. At this level, it's getting to be on the level of not, it's slightly above that level. We're going to start off with a 0.01 safety cap instead. see if it still works. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they're not happy with that. But that's going to reduce the amount of current they can get to that down to a level where it's safer. And I don't suggest you do this. In fact, that's why there is a disclaimer in my video. After you do that, if you accidentally did this and touched ground at the same time in your bare feet, you might get a little bit of a uncomfortable tingle, but it's not going to blow you across the room. And that's why we replaced that cap, because all of this, everything that's happening here is floating and not touching that chassis. The only point that any of that touches chassis is through that capacitor. So we're going to replace, again, that 0.068 capacitor with the 0.01 microfarad capacitor. And again, we'll see if it still works. It might not. Who knows? Well, we got the safety cap installed. So now that cap is what everything on this set goes through to ground. And it still works.
The human heart. Jesus.
The organization at
They haven't hit 150 yards.
Those buyers handles everything, so you won't have any surprises.
Still pretty sensitive, and the audio quality is good. I'm going to probably straighten up a few of these capacitors so they're not so long and gangly. And then it'll be time to add the oh-so-famous and sometimes hated and controversial audio input feature, where instead of having to be forced to listen to nothing but AM, if you so choose, you can listen to your music or commentary or whatever else you want to listen to at your disposal versus being stuck listening to AM, which, I'm just going to be honest, is a dumpster fire. It's mostly hate radio, religious stuff, and, I don't know, infomercial stuff. Like, oh yeah, if you even play news, if you're lucky in an area that actually has an AM station that plays music, then good for you. Around here, nope, not so much. All right, so as I said, I'm going to add an audio input feature to this radio, and it's not that complicated. There's just a few steps that you need to take, and most of it has to do with safety. Even though I've put this capacitor in here, which is going to reduce the amount of current that's getting to the set, the museum I'm at goes a few steps beyond that, and kind of a end-all be-all period at the end of the statement when it comes to electrical isolation are these guys. It is an isolation transformer, or at least that's what it's going to do. Electrically, I can describe it as a 120 volt wall wart with 110 volts in, which is this primary side, and the secondary side is going to be 12 volts. We're going to run the audio through that, and again, that's to prevent any possible shock hazards that could come up. We're going to run the audio through this volume control, which will treat the incoming audio signal exactly the same as it treats the incoming radio signal, which is it's going to act like a big resistor and reduce or increase that signal. So we can attach it to one of the legs here. There's 3. And what you'll want to do is establish what is the negative and what is the positive. And the negative and positive are on either ends of the volume control. This is negative. Well, no, I'm sorry, this is positive. We know this is negative because it's one of the common negatives here. We have one wire, and that is going to this IF transformer. That's essentially what is putting the radio signal into the radio and through the volume control. So if we run audio and we want it to be clean, we'll need to be able to shut the AM signal on and off. So we're just going to cut this and run a wire out the back with a little switch, and that will reestablish that connection. There's also a few other things we need to do that are critical, which is we need to make sure that our right and left channels are tied together to make mono, and that we also have a little shunt that we're going to put in to prevent this transformer from interfering with radio interference or radio performance and sound quality. And I'll explain that a little bit. What I'm going to do is kind of pre-manufacture this with some of the components I want, because it's easier to do it out of chassis, and then it will be glued in probably going to put it like somewhere right here because there's not much room. Unless we could go on top and then go through. Yeah, I think I'll do that. That seems like a good idea. It's easy. So now you see I've clipped this little wire here. And all I get is a little hum, which is normal. But if we touch this here, so we'll just attach a little teeny little wire that goes out of the back. You want to keep that wire real short too, so that this doesn't act like an antenna. And that'll turn your radio signal back on and off. And now we can handily use the volume control for our own purposes now. We can use it to run audio through. And like I said, I'm going to manufacture the little bits and pieces that needs to accompany this on top of this. And they're going to flip it around. And actually, no, I kind of wonder about that. Do I need to do that? Should I do that? I want to do something else too. What I don't want to do is use this grommet and this hole, because I hate drilling holes, for the audio cable. And I'd much rather the audio cable just go here. That's what I'm going to do. Screw it. Alright, so here's all the stuff that I added. This is the secondary side of the transformer, and we have the pair of resistors twisted together. And our right and left channels will go through these two 30 ohm resistors. The primary side is the side that goes towards the volume control. And by experimentation, we kind of figured out that these transformers, if you leave them wired in, that they will interfere with the way that the audio quality sounds on the radio. Not sure why. But so we added this sort of a shunting mechanism, and it is a resistor that's half the value of the volume control's resistance, and then a 0.05 rated cap. And so I like to put these all up on top like that, because when I solder it all in, I'll put a little hot glue over all of it, so it's all sealed up. And also, like, if this ever comes loose, I don't want it to bang around inside of here and hit stuff. Meanwhile, I do have the switch wire run. I ran it through this hole here from the volume control, so it's not going very far. This isolation transformer is going to go right here, and then it's going to we'll have this skinny wire running to the volume control. I do want to make sure there's nothing that's going to hit here when I put it back in the case, because I need to have some clearance. I get a feeling I probably will, because the speaker you see is elevated too, but I'll just double check. I got the whole little system installed here. We have the isolation transformer, and then we have its wiring feeding around the clock, around the base here, and that goes up to the volume control. Right now I've got a little Bluetooth thingy with music playing on it.
All the music of life seems to be like a bell.
But then, like, if I want to listen to the radio, you just unplug it and flip this switch. So you see the now the transformer isn't interfering with the radio reception or its tonal quality whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is get out my glue gun and just put a little dab on top of that, and also put a little here so that doesn't get yanked out. And then it's time to work on the case a little bit. It's pretty clean already, but I might just go over it with a little bit. This is the first cold day here. Cold for California anyway. It's like 60 degrees now. I'm like, whoo! Christmas is coming! I don't know, I'm a big weenie about cold weather now. So let me fire up the glue gun and take care of that, and then it's time to work on the case. But I'm going to go get a sweater. Alright, so we have the glue covering this, and we have a little glue to prevent this from moving. So what I'm going to do now is actually clean up the case a little bit more. I mean, it's pretty clean already, but it will just give me a little bit of, I don't know, self-satisfying sort of indemnification for restoring this in the first place. I also want to maybe clean the top up a little bit here, the tube sockets in the middle and stuff, just to make it all look snazzy. In fact, I'll do that first, and then I'll do the cabinet. Then it'll be time for reassembly. I cleaned up the chassis, even though no one will probably ever see it, but it makes me feel better. Lastly, I'm going to just polish the case up a little bit. This appears to be Bakelite, and with Bakelite, you got to make very sure that you're not damaging it. The finish is actually surprisingly delicate, and if you use anything abrasive on it, like the surface is very easily damaged. I'm looking here. There's a crack here. I didn't notice that before. I think someone has repaired this. Let me see. You can usually tell by the noise it makes. Someone did a very good job of gluing that in, so that's good. It's repaired. That's totally cool. That's in the back. It's too bad we're missing that part of the S, but that's all right. You know, by the time you get to be 75 years old, things aren't perfect, so it's all right. So again, I'm going to use a wax on this, and just take your time. I'm going to use an old t-shirt. Sometimes I get out my mechanical buffer, but it's late in the day. I don't feel like doing that, so I'm just going to do it by hand and put a little bit more of a sheen on this just to make it look pretty, and then we'll put it back together again. That thing turned out pretty damn good. You know, it actually sounds pretty good too, and it really cleaned up. I mean, look how shiny that is. Maybe I can sneakily paint the rest of the S on there and it won't look like it's so obviously missing. But here we have the little switch in the back that we can switch back to radio. So if someone wants to listen to the radio, they can.
Some moves and then get him. They only have
Discrimination protection. And early voting is underway. Years. So far, some 42 million people across the country have already cast their ballots. Get VIN News on demand 24/7 at VINnews.com.
Get out there and vote, people. I will definitely have an opinion depending on how things turn out. But everyone around the world that's watching this, I don't know. I'm not a religious person. Say a prayer for us. Anyway, this one turned out pretty good. It looks good. It sounds good. And even though I only briefly smoked it, it came together nicely. Now, after this, I'm done filming this, what I'm going to do is let it sit and run here for, you know, maybe like a day or something. And that way, if anything's going to break down, you know, like after, especially being in a hot cabinet for hours and hours, things are going to change, expand, contract, and whatever. I want to know about that before I send it out into the wild. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and until the next time something like a radio or a television, who knows, anything that runs on electronics comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.